They now live in different worlds, but more than 3 decades ago, 2 Tasmanians experienced the advances of a sexual predator. In the 1970s, a teenage Bryan Green moved to Burnie with his family. Their house backed onto the city park. Robert McKellar-Ellis was working in the park under a court order. Mr Green was able to escape the sexual deviant. Mr McKellar-Ellis wasn't so lucky. It's a playground for children and meant to be full of joy, but the picturesque Burnie Park sends a shudder down the spine of Robert McKellar-Ellis.
I feel very apprehensive. I don't like being here at all. It's not a nice feeling.
In 1975, when he was 22 years old, Robert was sent to the park to do 20 days of work orders after being convicted for driving while disqualified.
Well, I worked all around here. Me and 4 other work order boys worked here, and just doing the flower beds and cleaning up and doing whatever we was told to do.
The supervisor of the work orders was Vivian Frank Kingston.
He worked for the Burnie Council during the week, and on the Saturdays that the work order boys worked in the park, he worked for the probation department, supervising the work that the work boys had to carry out.
Kingston was the park's caretaker and lived on site.
This is the caretaker's cottage in the park. It's the same as it was in 1975, and this is where all the sexual abuse took place.
Not long after starting his work orders, Kingston invited Robert in for a beer and a chat.
The following Saturday, he asked me again to go into his hut, where he gave me some more alcohol. Anyway, it went on, and I got quite drunk, and he sexually abused me. I worked at the Burnie Park for 9 days before I was sent to another area of Burnie, and during that 9 days he sexually abused me, and on 3 occasions he anally raped me.
It was to be 30 years before Kingston was convicted for sexually abusing him and 14 other young males. In 2005, Kingston was sentenced to 8 years jail for 24 counts of sexual abuse in what the judge described as a scene of great depravity. The judge added, "Your criminal sexual deviancy followed a regular and sordid pattern." Kingston was extradited to Tasmania after being convicted in South Australia and Victoria for similar offences against young males during the 1980s and 90s. Most of his victims were under the age of 17. Many were from a nearby school.
They had to come from the Maris College, and they walked down the track past his house. They were lured inside and plied with alcohol and pornography and cigarettes, anything that he could to sexually abuse young boys.
Robert says he felt like he had no option but to comply with Kingston.
My probation officer said to me that if I didn't do what Kingston ordered me to do, that's the supervisor ordered me to do, then I would find myself in Risdon prison before my feet touched the ground.
He says others undertaking court-ordered work at the park were in the same boat.
They were all, at one time or another, sexually abused by Kingston, and I just want people to know that. And I would like a personal apology from the Tasmanian government.
Deputy Premier Bryan Green was about 14 years old when he had an encounter with the pedophile.
We moved to Burnie from Georgetown, and our house was right on the back of the Burnie Park, and I was over the fence doing something I probably shouldn't have been doing. It's a long time ago now, but I had my air rifle over there, and Kingston caught me there, and made all sorts of threats, but then sort of let me off and started talking to me about hunting and that sort of thing, and invited me down to go spotlighting with him rabbits, because a lot of rabbits in the park there at that stage. So, of course, I did, and as a result of that, the first time was okay, and then the second time he started to he got the magazines out and then tried to fondle me, but that was sort of, I wore that, and then we went out spotlighting again. We spotlighted for a little while, and then I didn't get anything, so he said, we'll just wait here for a while, and when the lights went out, next minute he was all over me again, and that's when I made the big break for it. And I ran home. It was the longest run of my life, up through the Burnie Park, pitch black dark, and it was a bad experience. Yeah.
You count yourself lucky then?
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, particularly given that we're here talking about Robert, and I've met with him and just seen the anguish in his eyes, and just the way that his whole life's been affected so dramatically by his experience with Kingston. Yeah, I do count myself very lucky. Yeah, very lucky.
Ordinarily, the ABC would not be able to identify Robert because it's against the law to identify a victim of a sexual assault. But after 6 years of writing letters to the government, Robert felt the public should know what happened to him and made an affidavit to the Supreme Court stating he wanted to tell his story. The court granted the request. Robert's unable to apply for criminal injuries compensation because the legislation prevents anyone from being compensated for a crime committed against them prior to 1976. Both the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Ombudsman have told him his only option is to seek an ex gratia payment from the government. The Deputy Premier took up his cause.
Particularly given that he was in effectively state's care at the time. So on that basis I felt as though he should have been given some assistance as a result of that. And it's such a long time ago now, I guess, but really, it's just, the system has badly let him down.
In a letter to then Attorney General Lara Giddings, Mr Green said Kingston was known to police prior to supervising Mr McKellar Ellis.
That was my belief, and partly from what Robert had told me, and partly from my own knowledge, obviously. And the fact that he'd been reported, and I felt that that must have been common knowledge around the place that this person was not the sort of person you'd put in charge of people, young people in particular.
Mr Green took the matter to Cabinet.
The full Cabinet made a decision, and as I've said to you earlier, I'm not at liberty to discuss what was said in Cabinet, but suffice to say that the Cabinet advice was that under the circumstances there shouldn't be an ex gratia payment made.
Are you disappointed?
I was a bit disappointed, but that's how it is. You win some and you lose some, and on balance, I was a part of the Cabinet that ended up having to make that decision, which is tough.
In a letter rejecting his request for an ex gratia payment, Lara Giddings said the state could not be held liable for the actions of a council employee. Mr McKellar Ellis believes the state government had a duty of care, and lawyer Craig Mackey agrees.
Whether or not the person's performing community service because they've committed a crime, or whether or not they're a child that's been placed into care and they need to be looked after, the principle remains the same. On the face of it, it seems to me that this remains a state responsibility.
Mr McKellar Ellis says he drank heavily for 16 years in a bid to blot out the abuse, ended up in an institution after a breakdown and has been unable to hold down a job.
I just saw a lot of different self-help groups and psychiatrists and things like that, and through medication and antidepressive medication, I've been able to limp along in some fashion to the present time.
The ex gratia payment he's been seeking is a little under $10,000, enough for some dental work and some intensive psychiatric help.